Aquaba, welcome to You Ain't Imagining This. This is Amo Robin, your sister host here in YAIT Town, and I'm so happy that you're joining me on the front porch today. This, as you know, is a special place where we contemplate, we rest the mind and body, and we connect. I hope you're finding small moments of peace today and places where you can breathe. Perhaps here on this porch? We'll see. Before we begin the stories and conversations, I want to start with something simple. A question. Not a riddle, just a reflection. Have you ever left an experience in a predominantly white space and replayed it in your mind for hours and hours? Have you ever felt dismissed, overlooked, questioned, belittled, or made to feel smaller than you are? Have you ever found yourself wondering whether something really happened the way you experienced it? And last question, have you ever felt exhausted from constantly navigating in white spaces where you are expected to adjust, explain, or prove yourself? Well, if you answered yes to any of these questions, and I can tell you I did, then come on up on the porch and have a seat. This place is for you. You ain't imagining this, and you ain't alone. So this is what we'll be exploring together. So really, come on up on the porch, pull up a chair, get comfortable. Would you like a cup of coffee? Or maybe something fresh, like my special hibiscus iced tea with ginger and cinnamon? Take your time to choose, no rush. I'm just so glad you're here. We are going to change the pace a bit, slowing things down a little. So that's why it's good that we're sitting here together for a while. And it gives us a chance to talk honestly and to remind ourselves that we are on higher ground. Okay, I'm going to share something with you. I've been thinking lately about how many of us carry around difficult experiences so quietly, maybe even secretly. Sometimes these experiences just seem too small to explain. Sometimes they seem too complicated. We have all kinds of reasons for why we do this. Sometimes we're afraid that if we talk about them, someone will tell us that we're overreacting, we're being too sensitive, or we're reading too much into it. Okay, honestly, I could go check, check, and check, because I have heard all of those things. That's why I think we learn to carry them by ourselves. We replay them, we analyze them, we second guess ourselves, and often we just decide to move on with ever fully understanding why they stayed with us for so long, because there really is a reason. But here's what I've learned. Not every deep wound comes from a deep cut, or we could say comes from a dramatic event. Sometimes it's the accumulation, the buildup of the small moments, the interruptions. Yep, we talked about being interrupted. The assumptions. Oh yeah, those are always there. And the exclusions. The subtle reminders that can seem insignificant on their own, but they become exhausting when we experience them over and over and over again. And one of the hardest parts sometimes isn't always what happened. It's what happened afterwards. It doesn't just end when the event ends. There's the questioning, the denials, the ridicule, the self-doubt, the feeling that maybe you're the only one noticing. Again, I could go check, 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 and check. But here's the truth, fam. You're not. And this month, we're going to spend some time talking about those experiences. We're going to name them, explore them. We'll tell stories about them. But we're not going to stop there. Because here at YAIT, that's right, in YAIT Town, naming the experience is only the beginning. And let me stick with naming for just a minute, because naming is so important. There's power in naming. I remember the first time I heard the term racial battle fatigue. All of a sudden, a lot of things just fell into place. And I felt things kind of lift off my back. So giving something that name really made a difference. It freed me. So there's power in naming. And for generations, our communities have understood that when we can name something, we can begin to deal with it directly. When something remains unnamed, it stays confusing, or like it's not even real, but yet it seems even more powerful. It's hidden, and it keeps the power over us. But once we can point to it and say, that's what happened, then something begins to shift. The confusion begins to lift. The self-doubt begins to loosen its grip, and we can start responding to reality instead of questioning whether reality exists. Yeah, but we won't stop with naming. We can think also about restoring ourselves, because these experiences take something from us. They take our energy and our attention and our peace. Sometimes, and I gotta say, this was definitely me, sometimes they take our confidence. And over time, they can take a toll on our families and our communities as well. I've often struggled with allowing myself to take time for restoring, for bringing back what's been depleted. Then, and it just happened kind of randomly, I started spending time in nature, taking forest walks and bird watching. Yes, I'm a very proud black birder. I started spending more time reading. I love reading. I started mixing spices and listening to music and spending time with my sisters. And without even realizing it, I felt less stress and less anger and less alone. And I also felt more peace and more belonging and more safety. That's why restoring ourselves matters. We need spaces and places and people that can help us to replenish what's been depleted from us. Spaces where we can rest. We need laughter and reflection and places to heal and to reconnect with ourselves and one another. We know this instinctively, and we know it historically. Many of the great leaders and artists, thinkers, organizers, and the freedom fighters in our communities understood that restoring themselves wasn't a luxury. It was part of the work. They stepped away when necessary. They gathered their strength. They found refuge in community. And then they returned stronger. They returned whole. We deserve that too. But again, restoring is so important, but we're not going to stop there. So, do you know what's coming next? Can you imagine what's coming next? Okay, that was my little joke there. Yes, it is dreaming and imagining. Imagination is not separate from Black empowerment and Black liberation. They are a huge part of it. Dreaming and imagining, for me, even as a writer and a creative person, has been difficult for me, and I struggle with imagination. I think it's because it always seemed frivolous and fantastical and kind of a waste of time. But I realize now that dreaming, allowing myself to dream, and allowing myself to imagine has uplifted and elevated me. Gives me a view for where I want to go and what I want to see and what I want to experience. But we haven't always been allowed or encouraged to dream or imagine. Sometimes people thought that was for our own safety. Sometimes it's because we are so stuck in survival mode. But I want to give us a chance now to dream and imagine. And yes, sometimes the systems around us become so overwhelming that we spend all of our energy just reacting to what's happening right now, that we've really become experts in survival. But I don't want us to be stuck there. Liberation, real freedom asks something more from us. It asks us to imagine what could be. I mean, think about it. What does freedom look like or feel like? What does belonging feel like? What does safety feel like? And what does joy feel like? And these are all things that we can dream and imagine and ask about, not just for ourselves, but for our families, our communities, and for future generations. I often think about something Toni Morrison said. She's just so incredibly quotable and insightful. But I saw one thing she wrote, and it really stuck with me. She said, "Dream a little before you think." And I am crazy about it. I love that wisdom because she wasn't telling us not to think. She was reminding us that imagination has a place too. Dream first, then think. Imagine first, then build. Because every movement, every institution, every community, and every act of liberation began as an idea that someone dared to imagine. So I like to work on doing all three: naming, restoring, imagining. Because understanding what happens matters. That matters deeply. Healing from what happened matters. And creating what comes next matters too. So if you've been carrying questions or carrying exhaustion or carrying experiences that you've never quite had the words for, then you're in the right place. Pull up a chair. Let's do this together. The porch light is on. I'm Amma Robin, and I'm so glad that you're with me on the porch today. You ain't imagining this, and you ain't alone. I'll see you next week for our first story. Until then, remember, dream first, then think. Ashe, fam.